we've got Shawn and Sonny Hennessy joining us here for our conversation about expectations. Two of my favorite leaders in the world, chaplain for the Packers. You guys do the church together. I've been there, so Sonny's in charge, and you're the eye candy.
I am.
He is.
I am her trophy husband.
Yeah,
yes,
that's great.
it's really
Most people would say.
Tell us about the church.
Yeah, actually, we went there in 2012. It was dying. They were going to close it. They guilted us into coming there. And it's been the most intense ride that I could ever have imagined being a part of. And so a couple of years ago, what I did is I recognized where my weaknesses are, and part of that is in leadership. And that Sonny is naturally a far better leader than I am. And so I kind of stepped back and took a different title. And so she's the lead pastor. And initially I wanted to be called the teaching pastor, but somewhere along the line, I don't know if it's because I look old, but they wanted me to be called the senior pastor. So that's our titles, that I'm the senior pastor, she's the lead pastor, so all of the staff answers to her. And she teaches, I teach. We've actually just started a teaching team. So that's new for me. So that's one of the benefits of COVID, is it allowed me to pull back and recognize that I needed to let some people do more stuff.
Yeah, he was preaching 50 of the 52 weeks for 7 years in a row. But we were like, we're in growth mode. Like, people come, they need to hear their pastor, their senior pastor, which we kind of rejected the senior pastor title because it was old school. But in reality, we also are in a city, and we know where we live, where, well, women in ministry. So to have lead pastor and then teaching pastor, it almost sounded like I was in charge of him, and that's not the case. And we have to walk that out in our marriage too, that who is in charge. And and knowing our city, we knew this is an important step for the title. But now he actually is preaching less, which is good for him and his spirit, mind, our family. The kids aren't like, is daddy up working on his message on Sunday afternoon for next week?
Right.
Not this week, so it's helpful.
So this series is called Expectations, and I've been asking some form of this question to every leadership couple that we've had, and that is, when you first got married, what did you expect, and what didn't happen the way you expected it to happen?
Sex all the time. Yeah.
There we go.
All the
Boom.
time.
We're 3 seconds in. Very good. So you're saying...
What didn't happen?
That is the worst. Like, you just insinuated to the whole world. Every
guy listening to this.
Didn't happen all the time.
Well, no, everything. It was like a switch flipped, right? It was like, ooh, don't have it. Can't keep our hands off each other. Now we're married, and I mean,
I got home from work late.
Yeah. It's, why do we need to try to have sex more?
Right. Well, and a lot of couples.
Is that what you're looking for?
No,
okay.
Exactly. A lot of Christian couples are sex is sin, sex is sin, sex is sin.
Yeah.
I do. Now it's not sin. Okay, just the next day.
Right.
Yeah.
The next
and you
hour.
lose all the excitement and all the
of the scandal.
The rush. I mean, maybe that was just me, but
no, I think a lot of people. A lot of guys are listening to this right now.
I'm a little taken aback.
They're having two reactions. Some of the gals, a lot of the guys, two reactions. One is, oh, thank God, someone else has that same problem. And,
right.
Oh no, it is a problem.
Yeah.
So Sonny just said, one of the problems here is, then the way sex is portrayed in popular culture is, it's super easy to figure out.
Yeah.
The very first time that couple comes together in the romantic comedy, the sex is spectacular. They totally understand each other's needs. They understand each other's rhythm and move. No one has even talked about it. There's music on in the background, and it's not messy. And then all of a sudden,
you're so uncomfortable right now because he like.
I am the last. I don't ever talk about anything intimate like this. I'm like the biggest prude, and she is not. She's
found the freedom.
She's like, let's talk about this.
Let's
do this.
This is that forbidden thing, especially in marriage. Like, what woman goes to another married woman and is like, can I confide in you? What guy goes to another? So I think it is that unspoken struggle. And some would not have it at all. I get that.
That's true. Okay.
They wouldn't have it at all, or they wouldn't have the struggle at all?
The struggle at all.
Gotcha.
And to be clear, it's great. And I think that's the hope. 25 years. Look I'm just still making him uncomfortable.
Okay, we're going to get to the practically how you got out of that in a minute. So sex is one. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
It's absolutely true. Another expectation that you had, Shawn, that didn't end up mapping out the way you thought it would map out?
Yeah, I think for me, our marriage, I equate it in two different parts.
Okay.
Because the first 12 years were like one way, and then we took a break, which was, I never thought that would happen for me. My parents had a really ugly marriage, but they've been married 60 years. And like the first 55 years were horrible. Like I remember being a kid and just wishing that they would get a divorce. And so I think for me, when I was growing up watching that, I anticipated that my marriage would be a rom-com. It would be like Sleepless in Seattle all the time. And that it would be this really emotionally fulfilling, and even beyond the physical aspect, that it would be this really, it would be more fulfilling than it was, honestly.
Right.
And so for the first 12 years, I mean, we did get married really young. I mean, Sonny was 17 when we got married. Her parents literally signed her over to me. And so...
He was my parental guardian for 6
literally
months.
was. I was her legal guardian for
This
6 months.
sounds like a perfect way to start a lifelong ministry, business, and
Right?
relationship.
Yeah, and so
Set
I
us
think we had all of these expectations of what things were going to be like. We left college, we moved to Nashville so I could pursue a music career. I ended up being a used car salesman. We had no money. It was terrible. And so after the first half of our marriage, when we were both incredibly self-centered, both wildly arrogant, we took a break. I mean, she physically left me. And I mean, I legitimately thought she was going to file for divorce. It was bad. She packed my kids up and took off with in her parents' vehicle. And actually, her dad stayed with me, which was one of the most Christ-like things that I'd ever seen. A, he was worried about me. And B, he wanted to actually have this fatherly conversation with me.
But he was mad enough at
so
you.
mad.
He didn't stay at the
Nope.
house with him. He got a hotel because he was so mad at him. Yet he was going to be a father and walk him through it. And I think when I came to my parents and said I'm leaving Shawn, that was like the release of there's no reputation to uphold.
Yeah.
Because we had gone to marriage counseling with our pastor. I mean, but we're on staff at a church. And then we go to our pastor and he's like, oh gosh. You know, like, do you think, and so we didn't think we could get help because we'd gotten a couple different counseling appointments and we just would go home and still fight, like siblings more than anything. We just were dumb. And then finally we just left. I left.
Christian couples don't have these problems, and Christian staff members don't have these problems.
Pastors have
Well,
these problems.
we were caught up in our own world. I mean, we were both successful in our own right. I mean, I had been an evangelist for 5 years. I had climbed the corporate ladder of ministry enough that I was able to go places, do things, speaking all over the world. Sonny was a youth pastor with hundreds. She had the largest youth ministry in that portion of Florida. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of kids. And it was just, we were so caught up in who we are and caught up in our own thing that I think that we forgot that it's supposed to be two becoming one. And it was just like one becoming one and living in the same house. And so I was so insecure.
Wait, back up. Say that again.
That we were one becoming one living in the same house. And so the longer that we were married to each other, I actually think we were getting further apart rather than getting closer together. And so we would...
And what was driving you further apart was the fact that you both had your own significance, identity, jobs. A lot of our couples have this problem. I mean, I know couples, he's a doctor, she's a different kind of doctor. Yeah. He's great corporate, she's incredible volunteerism, unleashing compassion, and there is a competition of significance in that.
We were definitely competitive. I mean, I remember I preached...
At my youth ministry.
Well, before that, I had just finished preaching. I think it was like the Pennsylvania-Delaware Youth Convention. There was like thousands, 10,000 kids there. And you know, I gave the altar call, as we would call it, at least in the Pentecostal church. And I mean, it was like 8,000 kids came to the altar, crying, "Oh God, we love you, Jesus!" And so she had me speak literally that Wednesday at her youth service. And I thought, oh, I'll just preach the same sermon. I crushed it. I got to her thing. We got home that night, and she said, "Did you even pray before you got up there? Because you missed it. That's totally not where my kids were at. That was a fail." And it was like, "Bro, how are you going to talk to me? I'm like one of the top speakers in the world. How did I miss it?" And that was a microcosm of our relationship. Two people living their own lives, building their own empire, and I was so insecure. I mean, I presented myself like I was this great supporter, and publicly I would proclaim her greatness. But really, I didn't want her to be better than me. Like, I want you to be great, but kind of like great light. Like, I want you to kind of be right under me. And the more successful she became, the more insecure I became.
Well, and I didn't help with the insecurity in him because I was the Post-it note queen.
Oh, yeah.
Which was garbage, 16 other things you need to do. And these aren't like things for me. Like, you need to do this for yourself. Like, make sure you make the call at work.
The passive corrective, sticky guidance to your life.
I've learned to hate sticky notes.
If we could give one physical representation of the difference in marriage one, the first part, 12 years, and the last 13 years, is that the sticky notes went away. And I don't do it, I don't text him, remember, but in my head, I'm 17, he's 21, and I'm more mature than him, and I'm like making the thing run and paying the bills.
And you just got this leadership gift. It's coming out.
Yes. Yeah. And there is this weird, terrible, one of my least favorite cliches. I have 3 kids. Well, I have 4. I raise him. And I don't think that's funny because I lived that out. And it only made him more insecure, which then puffed him up in pride externally and internally. He was shrinking, insecure in us even. Wow. And I was lording over him and I was being his mom at home. And I don't always talk about sex, but no one wants to have sex with their mom. And so, like, if you have an intimacy issue and you're the one wearing the pants in the family, there you go. Like, that could be part of it.
We can't leave that alone. When there's a power struggle and one of you is being the parent, it's death to intimacy.
Yeah.
Because you do not want to be intimate with someone who's parenting you.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it sounds so uncomfortable to talk about, but this is such a dynamic in so many relationships.
Yeah, and if you want to push your spouse into the arms of someone else, that's about the fastest way that you can do that.
Somebody who makes him feel strong and big and secure and would never leave him a note, or someone who would encourage me and not fight with me, but think I'm beautiful and wonderful, like, sign me up. And he's signed me up. And so that's where we were headed. Was we really don't like each other at home, but we were also very codependent. So that's some couples, they're competitive and they're fighting, but they're also extremely codependent. Now, I would say, well, of course we're in a healthy way codependent. He's my best friend. But at the time, I mean, our fighting and making up we're both as passionate and aggressive and angry as how strong we are in the business or in the ministry world.
Wow, that's huge. So give everyone some practical advice for couples who have this huge things going on, busyness. Give us some advice. How did you bring that back together?
Yeah, I think, and it sounds cliche, especially like when you've done marriage work or read all the marriage books, is that we actually had to take the time to get to know each other. So we had to learn the basic steps, like, hey, what's your personality type?
Yeah,
and
we learned that.
What is your love language, right? So, like, my love language is gifts. That's my number one. But she doesn't like buying gifts, and she would never give me gifts because she was afraid that she would buy me something and I wouldn't like it. Well, her love language is quality time and words of affirmation. Well, I didn't have time, and the last thing I want to do is compliment you because I grew up under a mother who was always farming for compliments. And so that made me feel like, again, she was my mother. And so, and the more that we learned in those type of areas of our life, and then I guess I kind of came up with this idea that I needed to figure out what my actual priorities are and begin to filter my life through those things. And I think a lot of people say, like, if you were to ask somebody, especially if they're in ministry, what are your priorities? Well, God is number one. That wasn't true for me. I think I thought that. In all honesty, I think in those 12 years, had I died while I was on the road preaching at a revival service, I don't know if I would have went to heaven. I don't even know if I was saved for the first 12 years of our marriage. Like, I think I said a prayer. I know I said a prayer in a locker room You know, when a football coach led me through the thing. But I don't think God was a priority for me. And so then obviously I couldn't prioritize anything else that he said that
There
we should
is a way
prioritize.
to do ministry and not know Christ.
Oh, T.D. Jakes says you don't have to be saved to be anointed.
He used a
Wow.
donkey.
Yeah.
He spoke through.
You wanted to say ass.
I did.
Yeah.
This is Bayside. It's biblical.
Okay, we say
It's
ass. I mean,
okay.
and it's a donkey ass.
Yeah. So I had to come up with this list,
Yeah.
and it's become one of the mantras, not just of our church, but of our life, right? Here's my 5 priorities. Like,
good.
here are the top 5 things. And so it's like, for me, in my life, it's God. That's, a legitimate thing for me.
You had a real surrendering.
Oh, 100. Well, when you lose everything, we used to say for the last 5 years before we got separated, we would have conversations and say, do you think if we weren't in ministry, we'd still be married?
Yeah, when you have those conversations, or do you think if we wouldn't lose our reputation in the community, would we stay married?
Yeah.
You say that to each other, you just plant that
You've already
doubt.
given the answer
You've
to
given
that.
the answer.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and so finally, when we got separated, we left ministry. And we realized that we loved each other and liked each other more than we liked and loved ministry. And we tried to leave ministry. And then once we began to get healthy, I mean, we went, and these are taboo, like in the ministry world, or for somebody who works high up in corporate, it's taboo to say, I needed to have counseling. I needed to have counseling. We discovered this. We didn't have a marriage problem. We had an us problem.
That's good.
I had a me problem, and she had a her problem. And so when I figured out who I was, and she figured out who she was, then we discovered, you know what? I actually do want to be married to you. And now we were given the choice because we were almost not married.
Right.
And so now we remarried each other.
Yeah, when we do marriage counseling with couples or talk to a couple in a lobby, just a brief thing, we always say, start with counseling for yourself. I realized I didn't have the big traumas he had, like abuse in his childhood, I thought, oh, he for sure needs counseling. Like, I don't. But when we went into this men's only, dealing with the men thing yourself, me going the women's, I only dealt with me. What we found out is that I did have plenty of things. Something an uncle said, something my mom modeled at home that led into our marriage. After we got whole and healthy and went through this program, we never did come back and do a marriage conference or counseling, and haven't since. Not that we're against it. We think it's awesome. You need to
For
tune
you,
up.
healing what was in you is what brought it together.
Yeah. We were 2 unhealthy roommates trying to make it work, and roommates can move out. They can move out of the dorm
That's
and get away
good.
from each other. You get married, you're unhealthy roommates, and you're like, I hate you. And then you have children to make it better, and you hate the children, and they
Children hate you.
Yes, and it's
another
a bad roommate
dysfunctional
situation.
family of origin begins another cycle
Yes.
Yep.
of crisis.
So now he's a very healthy man with God as a priority.
Yep.
And that looks like practically, I was going to say this, I was watching you prayer journal on the plane because typically I find him in his chair. He's prayer journaled every morning without fail for 2 or 3 years, like without fail. And that has changed him too. Like, that's a practical that if God is his number one priority, what's that look like?
Yep.
Starts with the morning, he's prayer journaling, and I've seen him change to a different
Something we
human.
teach around here always. It begins it begins with a real surrender to God.
Yeah.
So, but you said 5 things.
Yeah, so
and
I
I think we got so much good content. We only got to 1.5.
Well, and our kids know our priorities, which has been really helpful in our family
So
dynamic. So it goes
priorities
God,
number-
and then it goes me, which I think sometimes when you tell people that, they're like, girl, what? That's selfish. And I go, yeah, but an unhealthy me creates an unhealthy marriage, creates unhealthy kids, creates an unhealthy job, all of that stuff.
Here's
and so
how Pastor Ray says it, if I could just interject. And this is tweaked with my head for a while.
Yeah.
And the more you think about it, he said, my number one job as a pastor, leader, father, husband is to keep myself encouraged in Christ.
That's so good. That's so
Because I realize I'm trying to get everyone else encouraged.
Yeah.
I don't really have that power to do that.
Yeah.
And my unencouraged self hurts them. So I go, my relationship with God, and then I got to keep myself encouraged. So anyway, just
Well,
say
and women
amen
do
to that.
good at self-care, or they're told to do good at self-care. But what about a guy?
No.
Like, what is because self-care is really not talked about with men, but yes, he has to be in a good place.
Yeah, so it goes God, me, then Sonny, and then my kids. And so my kids know if the boat's going down and there's 2 life jackets, I love them and I'll see them in heaven. because their mother's more important to me than they are. I love her more than I love them. And it doesn't mean that I don't love them. It just means she was first. I picked her. God blessed me with you. But you're going to be gone.
And that's the best way to give them secure futures.
And they love it.
They
They're
do
like,
love it.
hey, and then they smile.
Yeah,
like
100%.
They do love
Yeah,
Yes.
and so then my family and Sonny's family are number 5. And what's really helped for us, being in church ministry, is that now our church goes, oh, but it's not that you're not a priority. You're in the top 10. You're just not in the top 5.
And they hear that.
So if my son has a football game, hey, guess what? I'm not going to be here. I can't
good.
fit everything in, so I have to filter it all through that. And for the first 12 years, that wasn't happening. It was a wreck.
Okay, so 2 more questions here. So much good stuff. I got one, Kelly's got one. And mine is, just knowing you guys, you have dialed your roles. I think even in our first little introductory conversation there, you mentioned this. How did you figure that out? I'm good in this lane, she's good in this lane, he's good in that lane. Tell me, how do you do that?
I do believe it's working on yourself. Like if I can find the issues and problems in myself first, and if that takes me a day, a week, a month, a season, then I will quit looking for the negative in him. So I had to look at it and go, okay, why am I insecure in this area? Okay, so he's an amazing speaker, but I've been told I'm a good speaker, but I mean, he's really a great speaker. And I would compare myself to him, and he's the greatest person in the world to me, and I'm in a competition. And so I had to get to that insecurity in me, work that out, realize that had nothing to do with him, that had everything to do with I had fear of man. I was insecure in what people said or thought of me. So that helped. And then I think the same for you, instead of going, well, I've had people say, like you've said this, you used to want to be a great leader, or people say, Shawn, you must be a great leader. And now I hear him say, I'm not a great leader.
Yeah, I would go, not really. I'm not really a great leader.
And since you've been saying that.
That's what I think is one of the greatest leadership qualities you can have, by the way.
I just think,
is not taking
like when I went through the filters thing, like that's just helped me so much to go, like when I have to be put into a leadership position, that doesn't encourage me. It drains me. I don't want to do, like I don't want to do a meeting. I don't want to like sit with all the people at the table. Like if it was the Last Supper.
My ego wanted me to succeed there, but my actual spirit doesn't want to sit
So like
in that
when we do
seat.
staff meeting, it's a 50-50 chance if I'm even going to be there.
Or he'll just get up and leave at some point.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And
when
they
I
know.
get bored, I leave. But they know, so I like.
And the second you leave the room, they start getting things done.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.
Because what we'll do is like sometimes I'll start staff meeting with like a little talk. It like it's something that I had a thought. And this came in, and then it's 22 minutes later, and like, oh my God, we gotta go to work, bro. Like, can we just get this on Sunday? Like, why is it all the teaching? And then I'll like leave, and then Sonny will go, okay, now let's get down to bit. And so I just identified that I don't really love leading. And maybe it's because I'm not naturally gifted at it, but she really is naturally gifted at that.
Yes.
And so it doesn't mean that I can't lead.
Was there a discussion, though, between the two of you? You went, hey, we're going to run these businesses, we're going to run this church, we've got all these outside endeavors, including the Packers. Did you get a piece of paper out and go make columns, or?
I think we said nasty stuff here in passing, once in a while, like, well, fine. Or, he'd be like, who's in charge here? And those are good discussions because I was like, he would say, I feel rushed in staff meeting. Like, I want to talk to the staff. So when he says, he 22 minutes, I'm really not irritated by it. Now I'm like, let him give the scripture, the spiritual, the vision. I want to get to the nitty gritty. So I'm like, no, I want you to. When I say, how long are you going to be? So those like, confrontations where we talked it out, he realized, I don't not want you to speak when I say, how long are you going to be?
So
this is my heart.
You just have to communicate.
You just have to communicate.
There is some negotiating here.
There was a little bit of that, though, when we started the businesses. I'm not a great leader, but I wanted to be the CEO.
We did have that
I don't want to be
discussion.
the COO. Like, I don't want the card. So we had to come to an agreement. Like, the businesses were her idea. Well,
But one time you said they were yours, and then
I
we
did
had
say that they were
an
mine.
agreement
Yeah.
to
Now,
disagree. Yeah.
I think some of the vision for where the exchange was and the fact that we launched it as a real business.
Yes.
I did have some input on that. But she's an entrepreneur, and
Right.
I'm not. Like I come from Detroit, from the blue collar. My dad worked in a factory for 30 plus years, never missed a day of work. That was me. Her parents owned businesses. They owned a huge ranch. And so I was like, I'm running fast to keep up, but I don't want to be. So we had to come up with a new title. And she is the CEO, and I think I'm like a managing partner.
No, I
or
think
something.
you're president because
I
you
don't
know
know.
that's
I don't
like,
even know
oh,
the
he walks
title.
into the
I just
meeting
know-
and he's
yeah.
like, but like he'll come in and deliver the food to people.
Yeah.
At times, and they're like,
Which freaks him out.
Is he?
Yeah.
Wait a minute, are
Is
you the
he?
guy from the stage?
yeah.
You're such a strategic leader, and you lead with the microphone so well.
Yeah.
And then I think where the Venn diagram crosses over between you two guys is you're both culture setters.
Oh,
You both
yeah.
want to speak into culture.
Yeah.
And it's kind of it's interesting, distinct, but there is some, it's never going to
For
be
sure.
totally distinct.
Yeah.
For sure. And we found out, I think we had said earlier for a tool, we found out our personality types. Beyond, although it's good to know, extrovert, introvert, extrovert, like put me around people, I'm good for the day and the week, give him some time away. That was important to know. You got to at least know that. And then your personality types, your strengths, love languages, huge. I think some people, especially driven people, are like, I don't need to get into all that junk. And,
Yeah.
you know,
It's really
not
important.
junk. It's really important.
Okay, so both of you guys, huge maximizers, ministry, business. Talk to us about at home at 6 o'clock at night. How do you leave that? Do you turn it off?
Great
Do you
question.
just have, now we're just an old married couple reading the Reader's Digest. How do you do that?
Is that still a thing, Reader's
Sure,
Digest?
yes.
I love that you just said that.
National Geographic.
I have no problem turning it off.
You don't.
I'm
Really?
like done. When I'm in the car, I'm like done. When I'm home, but it's that priority thing. Like work isn't in my top 5 priorities. And it's not that I don't care about it, but like I think I burned the candle at that end for so long that it was a very conscious decision for me that what I know is that it robs me of my affection. It doesn't build my affection. And so we do have those
What a
conversations.
great phrase.
But I know
Yeah, that's one of the things with the 5. Like once you decide beyond your 5 priorities, then what become your next 5 to get in your 10? And we choose that through a filter of what stirs our affection for Jesus or what robs our affection for Jesus. And we go through that filter.
So good.
So rather than a Reader's Digest, I need to be by water or outside. So
Yeah.
he knows, take me and get her filled up,
Yeah.
because that's in a priority that I go to an atmosphere I love, and that fills me up, which then makes us good. And he also knows I need to talk about work.
Yeah.
That stirs my affection. For him, it robs his affection to talk about work. When he wants to be in his car with R&B music playing, he's done for the day.
Oh, for sure.
And so, but
Oh,
like,
wait, there's
yeah.
too much going on here. I got to
Okay.
make sure everyone's getting this. So first of all, your next date night, everyone, is what stirs my affection for Jesus, what robs my affection for Jesus. Now couples talk. That
Tell
is
each
so
other.
good. And then out of that, I heard you say, you need to be out. You want to go home.
Yeah.
She needs to be outdoors.
Yeah, for sure.
She needs to be by water. So there's environments you can put each other in
Yeah.
that build affection, not just jobs you do or activities you do, but environments you do.
yeah.
And you have to be okay to know that work could stir affection in your spouse. For him, it robs it. For me, it stirs it. So there are times I know he's pushing through to keep talking about it. Or, I'm like, I was thinking in a few Sundays. Or then he goes ahead and he gives me some time. But I also, and he'll say this, he'll be like, okay, my ears are full. Like
My
that's
ears
my
are
cue.
full.
My ears are full. Or my brain is, what'd you
Yes.
say yesterday? You told me. You said, my brain's kind of turned off. That was my cue. So when you can have calm conversations, so later when you say your cue phrase, it's not a big fight. That's
Yeah.
important.
What's the one you and Jesse say about going in the room alone?
Cave out.
I need some cave time.
Yeah.
I need some
good
cave
to
time.
know.
It's not you.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
need some cave
Exactly.
time. Okay, good. Awesome.
It was interesting to discover that I am an introvert. Like I'm not a 7.
Right.
When you look on the sheet,
The Enneagram. Right.
not me, man.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that God put me in an extroverted role, and so
Right.
I have to force myself to do that. But it's not that I don't enjoy it, it just doesn't recharge me.
Right.
And so I know, and she's identified that like all day Monday, like I have a room, and it's got a huge TV and a great sound system.
I've been in the room.
Yeah.
I left sinning the sin of covetousness.
It's recharging
coming out of that room.
But
so
but
good.
the challenge
it's above
is
the garage. It's like a
it's
different
the
world.
It's
best.
a man. It's not even a cave.
It's not a man cave.
It's a man
castle.
oasis.
It is.
Castle.
Yeah, it's like Rapunzel was a guy.
he would lower his beard up.
would
He lowered the beard, and your friends come crawling up the beard to get restored as well.
Our dog crawls up your beard.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's the idea of spaces is really an interesting one to me, because I think oftentimes we talk about how we're going to talk to each other, what we're going to talk about, what each other likes. But there is something in a couple where you go, if I put you over here, you do better. If I let you go over here, you do better.
Yes, I think if I would send him away, which I do sometimes, go to your friend and go hang out and go to the places you like, which are not
Good.
girly places. He knows, like, say, do you want to take a walk? He said that 2 days ago. He's so... I knew what he was doing too.
By
He's
the
like, you want to
water?
go take a walk by the water? I'm like, yes. And he knew he had me. He should have asked for something. I mean, like, at that point, it was glorious atmosphere. Now, on the flip side, we were at our Exchange Coffee Mercantile and Eatery, and we were eating. And he was saying, there's dust on that light fixture. And that's too much lettuce, too much salad for the dressing. And finally, I looked at him, I said, I need you to, like, he knew I work well and I want to keep working, but I was in an atmosphere, I was in an environment. And so it's actually not just being self-aware, it's being spouse-aware.
Spouse-aware.
Why don't I think about what would just take the wind out of his sails and not do that right now? Why don't I think about what would really make Sonny lose the whole atmosphere environment of the place she owns? It would be to pick at something at the place she owns, and it's holding your tongue. I think good marriage is as much what you don't say and you hold back as what you do say. That's been the key in part 2 of the Hennessy marriage for sure. For the discouraged person, I often have to tell myself that life is hills and it's valleys. And we sometimes find ourselves in a valley and we just don't think we're going to come out of it, but we do. And then often we get to the mountaintop and we just want to hold on to it. But life is really hills and valleys. It's dips. But I love that when I come out of a valley, that mountain seems so much bigger and so much better. And so even though it's a roller coaster, the ebb and flow is what life really is. We don't go in just one straight pattern or only uphill. We do this, and that's everyone. And so for the discouraged person, your marriage will have good and bad days, and your life will have good and bad days, but they always come to an end, the bad ones. They always do. And I'm just grateful we've had Jesus as the center, and then truly as the center, the last half of our marriage, where we practically sought him early in the day, so it affected the day, because even a day can have ebbs and flows.
Yeah, I think one benefit that we had is we had a really great pastor when we were young in ministry. And I remember when we got separated, Pastor Buntain called me on the phone. And he's just the cutest little guy. He's like a little gopher. He had his little hands, and I pick up the phone and he said, "Yes, Shawn, it's Pastor. I'm just calling to see if you're still an a-hole." And I went,
He may have said it.
Oh, he did say it.
Yeah, which was not good.
That was like, it was like a shocker to me. And I go, I didn't know I ever was an a-hole, and I did say it. And he said, "Well, are you and Sonny back together yet?" I said, "No, sir." He said, "Well, then you're still an a-hole. Don't ever call me again." This was like my father. "Don't ever call me again until you and Sonny are back together again." And he had two sayings that,
There's the tears.
yeah, you get me talking about pastor, it's coming. He had two sayings that really got me through, which I think the point of this is when you've got a really strong spiritual leader in your life, whether that's your pastor or your small group leader, and he said two things: it's never too late to begin again, and failure's never final.